None of it's high stakes because they get to rewrite everything that they write. What's best about it is that the group works really, really hard with professors to accommodate a range of majors. I kind of felt a little guilty that I didn't have a writing course of my own. I think that the reason why people have a hard time doing some tasks is because they simply do not have the vocabulary to do that.
Howdy, I'm Mandy, and welcome to Write Away, the faculty podcast of the Texas A&M University Writing Center, bringing you news, tips, and ideas for making your students better, more innovative writers. Today we're talking to Dr. Dr Bednarz, geology professor here at Texas A&M University. Dr. Bednarz earned her bachelor's and master's degrees in geography with a specialty in geography education, and went on to receive her PhD in education curriculum and instruction from Texas A&M. She teaches Geography 404, Spatial Thinking, Perception, and Behavior, which she designed to emphasize spatial thinking and behavioral geography. Dr. Bednarz began by discussing why she created Geography 404 as a W course.
First of all, I was on the writing committee, and I've been on the writing committee for the last 3 years and reviewing other people's applications. And I kind of felt a little guilty that I didn't have a writing course of my own. Second of all, because this was a new course I was introducing, I knew that I wanted to have students do research related to spatial thinking, perception, and behavior. And so by having the process of doing research and writing, thinking and writing, it just seemed natural for me to make that course into a writing intensive course.
Next, she offered some advice to prospective W course instructors.
It's really a wonderful experience because you have a chance to develop students' intellect in a way that you don't under normal circumstances. Typically in my department, we generally teach fairly large courses. So the other course I teach usually is Introduction to Human Geography, which has anywhere between 140 and 180 students. So there's very little opportunity really to engage in that process of writing and thinking and becoming a geographer, so to speak. But with the small class, the advantage, and we hope that writing courses are small classes, there you have the opportunity really to get to know each student one-on-one, and from the beginning of the semester to the end of the semester, shape their ability to think about your subject matter and to become a more skilled and proficient communicator about that content. So to me, that's really, really exciting. And some of the students barely make any progress, and some of the students just seem, under a little bit of attention, to bloom, to become much better writers and thinkers.
She also discussed the differences in workload between her W and non-W courses.
It's different. I don't mind reading students writing. And I do go through and I do all the things you're not supposed to do. Like I proofread and I show students the punctuation mistakes that they've made, and I do it by hand. I like to read and write on the actual piece of paper. I know some professors are much more comfortable getting it as a Word document and then inserting comments, but to me there's something visceral about actually taking the piece of paper and writing on it. And it helps me, and I think it helps the students actually when they get the comments back. The tendency might be when you just do it in Word is to accept all changes, but when they actually have to sit down and look at what I'm saying, I think that they might be somehow beginning to learn the principles behind what I'm suggesting. So it does take time. If you have 20 kids in your class, it takes time to go through and read everything that they've written. And I make it a policy that I read numerous drafts of what they've written. So it's a write and a rewrite process. And sometimes by the third and fourth time, there are some students who just don't bother to go through and do the rewriting. You have to keep copies of what you've told them to do. But other than that, it's really, like I said, edifying just to be able to make a real difference in their intellectual development.
Next, she talked about what techniques help her in running her W course.
Well, what makes the grading manageable to a certain degree is the use of rubrics. I've developed rubrics that I use for almost everything. I give them to the students ahead of time so they can see what my expectations are, and they can use them or not to guide their own creation of the papers that they're writing. But then it also helps me in terms of grading to a standard, being consistent, and communicating with them clearly what's going on, right or wrong, in their papers. Sometimes they're great at punctuation, but their arguments are weak and not logical. So a rubric will help you to get at both ends of writing.
She also talked about how she uses peer review and other forms of feedback in her class.
We do have peer review built into the class, and I make the students, again using the rubrics, evaluate 2 other papers in one class exercise. And I don't know how successful that is. There are some students who are very, very reluctant to express an honest opinion to another classmate. They can use the rubric and they will be analytical and accurate, but then they'll write inane, like good try, nice handwriting kind of comments. That is a skill our students need to develop, the ability to critique in a friendly and constructive style. So I do use that peer review at 2 different opportunities or 2 different times in the research process. Other forms of feedback. At the beginning of every class, typically I'll take 5-10 minutes. It's a Tuesday, Thursday, so it's a little bit longer, just to talk about some common pitfalls that we have in writing, to give a little writing instruction. If I find a typo in the newspaper, I'll bring it in, put it up on the overhead and ask students how they might rewrite the first 2 or 3 sentences to make it more clear. Sometimes we critique letters to the battalion for illogical arguments, those kinds of things. So there's that feedback, there's the personal feedback, there's peer feedback, and then there's the kind of explicit writing instruction that we do at the beginning of class.
Next, she talked about how to improve students' peer review skills.
I think that the reason why people have a hard time doing some tasks is because they simply do not have the vocabulary to do that. Whether it's learning how to analyze patterns on a map or to critique other students' writing, I think that students just don't have the vocabulary, the concepts, the ideas. So to a certain degree, the rubric provides them with hints of what they should look for. But I am going to start just giving them statements which they can kind of practice and use to be better at constructively criticizing their fellow students.
She also talked about how she uses low-stakes writing assignments in her classes.
We have a series of kind of introductory ones which count as daily grades, where they're writing for me, they're writing about the content, but they don't count for a lot. But then the research paper, which comes more or less towards the middle and the end of the semester, is where they really have to start to apply their writing skills. So the first couple of low-stakes assessment activities are things where I get to see where they are, what kind of assistance they need, who are the students that might need extra help, who are the students who are already right where they need to be. And then we launch into the pretty high stakes. But none of it's high stakes because they get to rewrite everything that they write. And so in the end, students are more or less successful. But measuring from where they start, you might have a student who's really a C student and they move up to a B. And you have some B students who move up to A's through this process. I generally see improvement from the majority of students. Some students just don't put forth the effort and they never make any progress. And I did have one student actually who tried so hard, and he became a familiar visitor to this center. But his skills were so poor that he barely came up to what I'd call a barely literate level. He just really had a thing about writing, but he got better and he tried so hard.
Next, she talked about what she's learned since she created the writing intensive course.
I created the course because I needed to create a new course, and I created it as a writing course. I've done the class twice now, and I will do it again this spring. I have learned that students like the opportunity to express themselves in writing. There are very few students now who I hear, we have to write. And so I think that's a very positive thing. And I've gotten better at kind of anticipating their questions and their concerns, and better in my own writing instruction. People who don't have to teach writing, it's a little bit of a jumpstart to begin to think about the more effective ways to help students learn something that I can do naturally myself, because as a professor I have to write all the time. But there's a difference between doing something and being able to explain it to somebody else. And so I've gotten better, I hope, at doing that.
Finally, she discussed her experiences on the W Course Advisory Committee and her thoughts about the W Course Initiative.
It is one of my favorite university service requirements. It's a great group of people, and what's best about it is that the group works really, really hard with professors to accommodate a range of majors, a range of assignments, a range of topics. It's a very generative committee in terms of the fact that I think it helps university professors get better at what they're doing rather than simply being critical. I think it's a very constructive and helpful committee. I think that this is a very important initiative. At the beginning of my class, I always explain to students why it is that they have to take international and cultural diversity courses and a writing intensive or 2 writing intensive courses, because of the research that was done in the late 90s that found employers identified Aggies as being great workers, but not so well written and not so able to cope in a diverse workplace. So I am pleased to be part of both of these initiatives.
For more information about the topics discussed in this podcast, please visit our website at www.writingcenter.tamu.edu. Thank you for joining us for Right Away. Right Away is a production of the University Writing Center at Texas A&M. This podcast serves the mission of the Writing Center by providing a resource to help literacy and written communication skills at Texas A&M University. I'm your host, Mandy Crawford, hoping you'll join us next time, and reminding you, when you get the chance, write away.